Hey, welcome to the Sequential Artist Workshop Pro Calls. Every week we ask another creator, another graphic novelist to come sit down with us and tell us where they came from, what were the first things they made, what did they make recently, how did they do it, what are they thinking about now, how are they going to move forward, how do they keep going, all those things, career things, art things, feeling things, creative things. Every month it's a new creator, new challenges, new stories. Come check it out. Come sit down with us. You can sit down live for some of these calls by being a member of our groups. You can find us at learn.sawcomics.org. Come check it out. Come be a graphic novelist with us. Come join us on the socials. Sometimes it's Comics Workshop, sometimes it's Saw Comics. Either way, come check us out and welcome. Well, we are here for Cara Gormally now. Cara, I'm going to spotlight you if that's okay. Let's see how this works. There we go. Cara, it is so nice to see you. You are going to tell us a little bit about your creative journey, which I know involved being here a little bit, but involved a lot more. You also have a brand new book out, which I want you to tell us where to buy.
Yes.
And I'll just let you start. Welcome, Cara. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
This feels so good because it's all my people, the cartoonists. Um, Let me actually go ahead and drop the um book in the chat.
That's the way to do it,
It's
right
there.
off the bat.
So don't forget about it. There you go. Yeah, so let's see. Uh Tom, can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see if it's gonna let me. Yeah, here it is. Okay.
So excited for this, Cara, because I don't know a lot of this. I only know sort of like little slivers of this story. So I'm really excited to see what. All right. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Can you all see the
Yep.
slides? Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this whole sort of my whole comics journey, how I got here, and also like how I got to Saw. And I think Tom knows like a little bit of that, maybe not before. So yay. Super excited to dive in. Thanks everybody for being here. I really like to give everybody a roadmap of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to share a little bit about my comics origin story, my process. I'm going to talk about writing about trauma and therapy because I think that's pretty unique. And I think that's also something that a lot of people who are writing about graphic memoir and graphic medicine may be interested in. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about new work,
All right.
which is I think when I kind of go through how a book is made, it will make sense like why I'm talking about new work now. Yeah, so as Tom said, I'm Cara Gormally. My pronouns are they, them. Um, there's a family controversy about how to pronounce my last name. It's fine if it's Gormally or Gormally. It's Irish, and some parts of my family pronounce it one way, and some parts pronounce it another way, and usually nobody can spell it. So a little bit about me. These are all kind of different roles that I am. I'm a parent, cartoonist, professor, researcher. And of course, I feel like as a cartoonist, I have to give you my official comics introduction. So here it is. I'm a cartoonist, a biology professor. Tell me about your experiment. Morning person, fan of long walks. In no particular order, I love chocolate, comics about serious stuff, dubbed Books Without Words by a dear friend, non-dairy ice cream, meditation. Everyone feels this way sometimes. Long talks with friends, yoga, dancing without any skill at all, and deep dives into research. Whoa. So this talk is really about cartoonist me, but I think everything is connected. So I kind of wanted to share that brief intro. And I think something that really kind of overarchingly connects all of my comics work is underneath is this whole longing for belonging that I think comes from my family of origin. And so through that, I've really found diary comics to be this awesome place to explore like who I am and to really see myself, to see my queerness. And then through that, being seen and finding belonging. I also wanted to share some early work, which I dug out this morning. Um, when I was a little kid, I would make these books
Hmm.
with tracing paper that were bound together with yarn. And those are early stick figures. And I just want to say that, like, books and drawing your art can be whatever it is. And if my kids showed me this, I would be like so super delighted to see this. So I think they're actually really pretty unique stick figures. This is me writing. I think I'm writing a letter. I wanted to be an author at a young age and then got kind of diverted into other things like being a biology professor. And specifically, I really wanted to be a journalist writing for a paper. And in fact, I had an internship in high school doing that. And so I've sort of made my way like a roundabout back via comics, making these kind of nonfiction narratives that weave memoir and research together. So my comics journey really starts when I was at University of Georgia as a grad student. I was busily doing research, um, and it really like, whoops, let me go back. Um, yeah, busily doing a lot of field work, lab work, some greenhouse work. Uh, and I was earning all these awards because it turns out like I've been like, pretty much like a workaholic overachiever for a lot of my life. And but I was finding that like something was missing. And I was also simultaneously really struggling because I was in a period of estrangement from my family of origin. Um, So this is a small comic that I made a few years ago about estrangement. Understanding that estrangement is a complex relational process helps me to offer myself compassion for this challenging decision. A lack of emotional intimacy, a relationship that isn't functional, belief that there's no resolution, a physical distancing, a response to a betrayal of the family belief system.
Hmm.
And so I found myself making diary comics, and they were really, really simple in the first bit of making them. I literally just drew myself every day and did a lot of writing. They were way more text heavy than what I make now. And you can see, if you've seen any of my current work, you can see that my art has changed. But it's really cool to look back at this work and see it now. And it helped me to really connect with myself at the time. So drawing at that point was this practice that kind of came in and out of my life. And I think I really struggled with this whole question of like, am I good enough? Is my art good enough? And I think that's a common, like, I think a lot of us feel like this. And so meanwhile, I was like continuing to do this whole academia thing. And then again, when I was trying to conceive, I really dove into making comics again. I had gotten married before it was legal for me to be married to my ex. And we thought we were just missing this one ingredient. And it turns out that, like many people may know here, infertility is like just something that affects quite a lot of people, and it's not really talked about. And I learned that like trying to conceive ended up being this really transformative experience for me. There is this philosopher Lori Paul. I believe she's at Yale, and she writes about transformative experiences, and that essentially you have to be willing to imagine yourself like a future you, and be curious enough about that future you, and to be able to step through that doorway. And so I'd kind of not expected this process to be so transformative. But the reason that it was transformative was because I felt like such a struggle to be sort of seen in this process of going through IVF, in looking at research myself and really not seeing like queer people represented. And yeah, and also realizing that I was going through this kind of like series of 2-week emotional roller coasters on this process, which if you've been through this, you know it's like pretty unpleasant. I think the other reason it was really transformative was for me was that I really had to start reckoning with control. I couldn't just work harder to get pregnant. Trying to have a baby made me realize how little control over I had my body. It was really this like kind of science and luck mixture. Um, and I think this has ended up being this big theme in my life of like, and that I continue to have to unpack. You think like, oh, you go to therapy once and then you're like done. Like you did that, but then you realize, oh no, it's actually like it's in there deep, and you find these little shards of it. So comics really helped me to do a lot of processing over how little control I had over this experience. Um, I really wanted to capture what it felt like to be in my body. And I also wanted a way to make this process feel more connected with other people, and less lonely. And I also, because I'm a big nerd, I was really interested in all the science behind it. And I kind of wanted to make the science relevant. And so it ended up that making comics was, and using science and comics was like a great way to cope. And some like me are insatiably curious. With fear comes uncertainty. So I take control of science, or at least I try. I found myself diving into the biology of sperm and science, fertility, to help make sense of this journey. And so what I learned helped, but I still struggled to find myself as a queer person in the research I read. Um, and so I started making comics about this because I wanted to know, where was I in this process? Um, it is. Yeah. So I'm not gonna lie, using donor sperm is surreal, awkward, and odd in some ways. It's surreal to pick a sperm donor. Lazy laugher, nerd with nice voice, history nerd, hot model nerd, artsy nerd, travel nerd. Lazy laugher doesn't make it into my top 3. The interviewer was so awkward. Oh, yeah. So I see, Tom, you're asking lazy laugher. So we had nicknames for each possible donor to kind of keep track of them all. And it turns out like there's really high standards for sperm donors. So they're pretty much like all really nerdy and attractive people, but just with different unique characteristics. So I wanted to know more about families like mine. I found that in 2017, about 1 in 4 lesbian couples were raising kids. I'd guess this is because attitudes have shifted about what constitutes normal. I mean, what is normal? Who is normal anyway? And I think most of everything, I really wanted to capture the emotions of this process. Just the sheer amount of waiting too that's involved in this. So we're here playing this waiting game. And so I started publishing. This is when I first started publishing pieces of my comics. So this was 2017. I think this was maybe my first comic that was published. It was published in Mutha Magazine with Meg Lemke. Meg is awesome. If you don't know her, you should. She's a terrific editor and a wonderful human. And she really helped me to get this comic in good shape. Um, Meg is also the person that helped me find my way to Saw. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. Let me see if I can redo this comic. So finding a sperm donor wasn't the hard part. The grief was. Grief was a bigger part of the process than I imagined. Every month brought failure after failure, and oops, I'm sorry, I missed that part. I grieved that our child wouldn't be genetically related to both of us. I longed for the biologically impossible. My partner's imaginary, microscopic seahorse sperm uniting with my eggs to queerly make our baby. Each month brought failure after failure and the emotionally and financially charged decision to try again. We were gamblers faced with losses. We doubled down. What's that saying about best laid plans? I learned we had very little control. Things would happen in their own time. This process was so much bigger than egg plus sperm. So much of the process depended on random, heartbreaking chance. I tried to grieve it and go, a la a sign in a favorite bar, but grief compounds on itself. Grief drove us to try whatever it would take. I was exhausted. The journey was isolating. We put all our chips on the table to try in vitro fertilization, knowing it was no cure-all. And I also found that like making comics was just fun, right? It's like brings me a lot of joy. And so I also made a bunch of these comics, like about eggs hanging out waiting. Dum de dum de doo. Where is everybody? I've only got today. Oh, hey, finally. And so I did a lot of documenting of this process. It was such a sterile process. Take off your clothes. I've seen every examining room. They're all the same, including me waiting. Follicle stimulating hormones, egg retrieval, trigger shot, frequent monitoring, shots. It is overwhelming. IVF is a major undertaking. Then it's a waiting game. Am I? Am I pregnant? I'm familiar. What if this doesn't work? Take your time getting dressed. Let me know what you decide. Sigh. How did I get here? And I was really struck by the range of emotions. Like when I looked back at this work, real talk, I thought we were just missing one ingredient, sperm. The choices were overwhelming, but it hit us eventually at times when we least expected it. So it was around this time that I started taking comics classes. I took some classes at a school in Arlington, the Torpedo Factory, and then I trekked up to the Center for Cartoon Studies and took a summer class there where I made this mini comic called 17 Lost and Found. And for a little while, I was like really interested in drawing all my characters as animals. So I'll show you a couple of these pages. Um,
Hmm.
I know so much has changed, but I have a lingering bad feeling toward my mom that I can't seem to shake. Like my mom stole something from me when she read my diary and outed me. Why does that day continue to define my life? Why is it so pivotal in my memory? Maybe you need to read your diary to find out. Connecticut, 50 miles. Oh, look at this one. Oh, I loved her. Where's my diary? And then parenthood happened, and this felt like another kind of doorway and another a big change and kind of another transformative experience in my life. And I found myself having more questions than answers. I don't think I've like fully admitted that I had like such an anxious brain yet. Um, but now retrospectively, I can say that science really soothed my anxious brain. Um, and I just love me some Google Scholar, like, whenever you need it, 3 in the morning, if I can't sleep, there I go. Like I'm down a deep dive into some research. El Gale is asking, is that you having a conversation with yourself or someone else? It's a conversation with my ex and co-parent. Yeah. And so I gave myself a gift. I started making diary comics again. And there's a whole bunch of them. And I went back to therapy. I was trying to figure out some career stuff. And at the time, my spouse at the time was like, I cannot hear about this anymore. Please go to talk to somebody else. So, yeah, that's a real thing. So I did. But then this thing happened. I wonder who it is. Friend request. Him? No. And really, after my life as I knew it kind of fell apart. And I really continued to try to tell myself it was years ago. It's not a big deal. I'm fine. And then I had this other transformative experience in therapy. I wish there were bunnies. This is hard. That makes sense. This is a hard process. And you're doing your best. I felt seen. Her compassion helped me to begin to have self-compassion. And so afterwards, I found myself compelled to tell this story. I felt like this experience of unpacking shame felt so profound. My nervous system chilled. I found self-compassion, and I decided to write a book about it. So that led to my book. So I want to talk about my process.
Mhm.
And when I think about process, I was thinking about this morning when I was making these slides, and I was thinking, really, process is so many things, right? It's like not just the materials. It's not just like, did you use thumbnails? Did you work on Procreate or did you work by hand? It's also the logistical and the time management, especially if you're trying to like balance the rest of your life and do it. It's also the whole emotional part of it, especially depending on like what you're making this work about. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about all of that. Typically, I start with thumbnails. They're my first attempt at telling a story. And I've kind of go back and forth between making them on paper and making them in Procreate. But I'm not precious with them. I just put something down. And once I have it down, then I have like an idea in my head that when I come back to them, I know what I kind of need to do. And I really try to make them like as rough as possible. It also somehow kind of makes me like my art more, because there's something like so, it's like the line is just so free. Then I've been using Beth Tremblay's like really brilliant index card strategy to organize pages, to try to, again, like just get little thumbnails down and scribble stuff down that I need to know. And so these are early thumbnails and index cards for my book. And if you've read my book, you can see like some glimpses of stuff that ended up in there. There's also Edith Zimmerman interviewed me a while back, and there's a whole illustrated interview online about my process too. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but a big part of my process is finding myself down kind of these research rabbit holes. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So some of my first comics I was making for Mutha were just on pen and paper, but I pretty quickly moved to Procreate because oh my gosh, like cutting and pasting and being able to do things so easily. I just, I can't go back. Um, I'm like yeah, I'm a convert to Procreate. And so, yeah, so as I was saying, I tend to do this like deep dive down these research rabbit holes. And I'm trying to follow my curiosity until my questions are satiated. And so it kind of looks like this, where I'm going down, reading research, um, lots of things from PubMed, from Google Scholar, from my academic library. I try to take notes and jot down questions because a lot of my comics are interweaving research and memoir. So I wanted to also talk about how my book got made. And I found this book, How a Book is Made by Alicki, to be so delightful that I kind of, did what artists do and did some stealing and made my own version. So I'm going to show you a little bit of like a page that I made of my own version. Um, and first there's a little bit of a preface. So in 2021, I began a comics project and I was calling it Reboot. And these are some really early images from it. I started therapy again. I hoped for a reboot. I used to be a badass. Class tomorrow. What biology is useful and relevant? Don't forget. And, ooh, also, a boss. What does this graph tell us about stress? I could make myself do anything. For our next steps on this research project, what if? Let's do the revisions in the next 3 days. I'm on it. Woo, go team. Here's another early page. And some of these got reworked and are still in the book in very similar ways. My life started to fall apart on a day that began, I think the next page says, like any other day. Yep, like any other day. So I've been drawing comics for a few years, mostly for myself, especially through doing IVF. And I'd published a few things in Mutha Magazine, but I got stuck. And this is where Saw came in. It was lonely. I really missed seeing people. And the process was really hard because I was pretty much just doing it myself, trying to figure out how do you structure this story, this narrative that is based on my life, but um, I've got to somehow make it into something a little more linear with structure that other people might want to read. And so I found Saw, thanks to Meg connecting me with Tom and Beth. Um, and so the process became, it was sometimes lonely working on, because the only person who can make your book is yourself. But it also became this deeply communal process. And the critique was so very helpful. So yeah, Saw saves the day. Reboot is rebooted. In the very beginning, I found myself using the things like Monday goals to set goals for myself. We had graphic memoir, intensive group check-ins. Here's some early feedback. Um, it just was so very useful. Then I got to the stage where I was pitching the book, and I started out by pitching to agents. Um, it's interesting because when I look at it now, the book went through so many more revisions after that, and I felt so good and very different about the book by the time it went out the last time. And I felt different, like viscerally in my body about it. But I think I probably pitched too early, but how can you know that? at the time, but really pitching the book felt like this. It felt like flinging things off of a mountaintop and then just waiting. And I'm a pretty impatient person, and it's something I didn't work on in therapy. Maybe I should. I think the book process has helped me a little bit. It's also really wild to see what a manuscript looks like. So in 2023, this was 2023 me, and these are all, so not only did I have things on Procreate, but I also had paper pages that I had originally scanned in, and that whole stack was the book. If you've seen my book, it's actually pretty slender. So that's also like proof that you make a lot more things than you use. And so this, by that point, I had pitched it 4 times, once to agents and 3 to publishers. I had gotten, had started writing this in 2021. I signed a contract in November 2023. It was like amazing to sign that contract. So I want to talk a little bit about what it's been like to write this book that's pretty vulnerable about therapy and trauma. And also touch on like why graphic memoir. And I mean, I know I'm like speaking to the choir, but I think it's a good question to ask about, why is that the medium? And for me, I think the answer is really about the content. That for me, I found that after trauma, I was left with these shards. So I did what I knew how to do. It was almost as though I became the work. Nothing else existed. My brain felt safe again. Phew. Processing trauma is about putting the pieces together, about reauthoring a narrative. And in some ways, even though therapy is therapy and writing a book is writing a book, you're reauthoring this narrative in some way. And so what I found and that I loved was I felt like comics really could communicate all those sort of disparate, disconnected parts. And they could show the rhythm of trauma with panels and gutters in like such a way that was like both fluid and playful. Um, it could be like whatever you wanted to be. And I think that for me is like why comics and why graphic memoir. I just think when I think about how I would translate like these panels into words, I don't know. The words that it would take would be, I think, less understandable to someone looking at the page. I think also I really wanted to tone down any scientific jargon. I didn't want to use big words so much like dissociation or hypervigilance. I just wanted to kind of show what the trauma symptoms look like. And I think with comics, there's this beauty of like these visual metaphors and imagery that allows for that. And I think that comics also really can allow us to convey emotions. I took a class about a year ago with Shay Merck, and they really emphasized, excuse me, they really emphasized trying to give emotions on the page enough space. And so that was something I really thought about how am I using space? What does that pacing look like? What's the rhythm of the panels? The aftermath was hard. I didn't know what to do with the feelings, especially the grief. Help. I'd never felt so alone or needy. Luckily, there was therapy. See you Monday. Please don't leave me. And I feel like I'd be remiss to talk about comics and my process without talking about Linda Berry. because she's such a big influence on my work, and I know on other people's work. And one of my favorite quotes from her is, "You don't need to have any artistic skill to do this. You just need to be brave and sincere." And she's also got this really great quote about diary comics, about how it's a way to see yourself. And I'm not remembering that quote off the top of my head, but that that quote too resonates a lot for me. So one of the things that I did through early on in this process was really think about, like, what were my kind of guiding books, like my hashtag book goals. And I had read Teresa Wong's book, Dear Scarlet. I really love the narration in her book. It's so intimate and real and lovely. I liked Georgia Weber's book because I felt like the way that she used more images than words, and the way that she used words and the text became part of the art. I really appreciated that. Erin Williams' book, Commute, just kind of like left me on the floor. It's just so gutsy. And the way that she interweaves the way how trauma shows up in her everyday life, I think is really well done. And then near the end of, as I was working on my book, Tessa Hill's book came out, and that book, yeah, I loved it. It's amazing. And obviously it's just won the Pulitzer. Also, I love visual metaphors. So like, how could it not be, how could I not go with graphic memoir? So here are some examples of some visual metaphors in my book. My therapist turned away for a moment to close a file cabinet. Clunk. The sound felt like an ending and a beginning. Must do more, more, overworking to prove I'm worthy. I was even ashamed of the shame, meta shame. The meta shame made it even more exhausting. Oof. I don't need this now to feel worthy. So I mentioned that the process to me feels like so much more than just the materials and logistics. It's also like I think, such a big emotional process. Um, yeah, of all these, literally a feelings wheel. I've experienced this feelings wheel, probably everything on here, feeling really critical of the work, um, feeling really like kind of lonely and sad, and feeling like sometimes I'm writing a dissertation again. So happy and playful and delighted doing it. Um, and also this like kind of like amazed feeling now of seeing my book out in the wild in bookstores it's just, it's lovely. And then also stressed because I had the rest of my life, and I also had these deadlines to make after I signed the contract. And so, but I think that the process is really the point. And I have said this in a bunch of talks that I've given, that I really want to normalize that sometimes it's hard to trust the process. Writing a book is wild, especially when it's about trauma. I want to normalize that trusting the process is hard sometimes. Sometimes I find it hard to be in the process. I want to know what's going to happen. It all works out. I find in those moments, okay, days, okay, weeks, that I don't enjoy the process. And I started using this metaphor of these sled dogs because essentially, like, I didn't want them to pull me into icy water um, of like this, of keeping on, needing to keep on going. Instead, I find myself longing for the impossible. I call it timeline thinking. Whoa. What is being in the process? It's life. What if I slowed down? I want to believe being in the process is this defined path, but the universe shows me it's not. I use the compass in my heart. When I slow down and listen, I know what to do. When I slow down, I make space to play. I can revel in the possibilities that come to light because of uncertainty. So another really important part of this process for me was a lot of mindfulness, and like really leaving the book and coming back to my everyday life. Having a kid was this like that was super, it's been super helpful for that, because they're constantly in the moment. And so I would take walks around my neighborhood. This is some art nearby that I love. This is graffiti, and it just makes me delighted when I see it. I love looking at trees and flowers and leaves, just like kind of noticing things. For me, I think the graphic is part of the medicine. And for my scientist brain, it's one way that I explore how I explore questions. But first, for me, courage meant facing the shame underneath my unkindness to myself. Whoa, there's so much. Shame, even more shame. There's more, seemingly never-ending shame. There was no other way but through it, so I waded in. Yikes, it's deeper than I expected. Shame, unworthiness, meta-shame, cultural expectations, not enough, homophobia. This was me at my most courageous. On the other side, I could see clearly. I'm proud of myself. Your shame was undeserved, and I saw myself, whole, enough, lovely, and amazing. I'm proud and grateful. Shame doesn't scare me anymore. Yeah, and I see Kathy saying kids usually help our change our priorities, which can be helpful maybe. Yep, I would say like yes and no. um, because yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I just want to make this page, but I can't. Um, I also want to just let people know that there's an awesome trauma roundtable with Erin Williams, Tessa Hulls, Tom Hart, and Beth Tremblay and others, that's on YouTube, and it's great to listen to that too, and listen to those folks' advice about how to take care of yourself through this process. So what is my book about? So my elevator pitch, move the chat out of the way so I can read it, is workaholic professor embarks on a transformative therapeutic journey after a Facebook friend request resurfaces long buried trauma. Oops, go back and read that. Whoop. Sorry, everybody. Whew, only 2 hours left. Got to get this paper done and give students back their feedback on their work. And. So really, this story is about unpacking shame, and how shame makes us feel. It's such a universal experience. We've all experienced it, and some of us experience it more because shame is highly related to judgment about what's normal, whatever that means. And so I got really nerdily fascinated by shame too. So if you are also curious, I would encourage you to check out my Substack, Soft Things, where I've got many more comics on the evolution of shame. And really, I think that one of the most important things maybe to know about this whole process is that I really started this and I did this for younger me, to really tend to the younger me's that needed this. And at some points, that felt like such a selfish endeavor to me, to give to take that time. And then it came to feel like such a big gift to myself. Essentially like a kind of like a more formalized process of making diary comics. So when I say I wrote this book like 5 times, I think that's pretty much true. Like, various iterations, versions, drafts, pages that got dumped out or added. When I first started it, I was using much more of like kind of a journey metaphor to structure the book. That ended up getting kind of pulled, and I ended up structuring each chapter around a day. And so this typically the chapters start with the beginning of the day and end with the night. So here's like a page from one of the chapters. Just an idea. Good night. Sigh. I should. Tomorrow I need to. And revise that paper and make a new, read more, new graph, grade, email, look up, reply to, analyze data, review paper. Sigh. 5 a.m. alarm. So, right. So I didn't like, I was making this whole thing and pitching it. And at some point I started to feel like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be published. I started to feel like less, more like it probably won't be published. And so one part of the book was like especially important to me that I really wanted to see out in the world. And that was the part, I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but it's part about this biological concept called tonic immobility, which is essentially a physiological response that we have no control over that helps protect us when we are in situations that we can't control or escape from. And essentially, it freezes, your body kind of freezes up and you are stuck in order to, because it's the safest option for you to not fight back when you can't flee. And so I really wanted this part to be out in the world. And uh, I started pitching this part and I decided to try to um, aim high. And I pitched it to the Washington Post. And then um, it was like this amazing delight to get this email back saying that they wanted it. Um, and this actually really, publishing an excerpt of this was really, really helpful because the editor I worked on this with really helped to reshape parts of it. I pitched it and uh, not concepts in it didn't change, but art in it changed. Some of the structure changed. And that ended up, I think, kind of helping me to think about my book in a different way. And so this got published, I believe this was in June of 2023. And no, maybe May or June of 2023. And after that, I kind of felt like, okay, I'm feeling pretty satisfied, and I don't know that any more of this work will be out in the world. But then I heard back from a publisher who is actually not Street Noise Books. And they wanted to see the whole, it was another indie publisher, and they wanted to see the whole manuscript. And I thought, oh, shoot, the last time I pitched this was, I believe, in like March or April. And after I had reworked the excerpt for the Washington Post, I realized, oh, I really want to like rework the whole thing because I have ideas about this now. And so I said, awesome. And I basically asked them if I could get it to them in like another 3 weeks. And then I like essentially like worked my ass off to get the pages ready that I wanted to change. And I decided at that point, I was like, well, what have I got to lose? I'll pitch it again. I felt really viscerally different about it. When I looked at the way I was ending it, I felt like it made my body like happy in a way, like really satisfied in a way that I hadn't felt previously when I was pitching. Um, and so I pitched to Street Noise, and Liz took it. And so, yeah, that was another super delightful email. And then there's nothing like seeing this little blurb in the publisher's marketplace thing. It's pretty delightful. So, right, here we go, back to how a book is made. Um, who made this book? I did, said the author, artist. We did, said the editor, publisher, the printer, and many others. They all did. Many people made this book, and this is how they did it. So Street Noise Books is like a smaller team. So I've got my kind of two main people there who are Liz and Francesca Lynn, who is my editor. And there's also a publicist, and I do not have an image of Gina's head, so Gina's not on there, but I need to make one. I had like such a great time working with Liz and Francesca, and I cannot recommend them both enough. I wanted to walk everybody through. Tom, how are we doing at time? Are we okay?
Great. Yeah.
Okay. I also wanted to walk everybody through kind of what it looked like for an evolution of a page, really from sketch to final page. So I started with either hard copies of like on actual paper and pencil that I would then import into Procreate, or rough kind of pencils in Procreate. And then I went through 3 rounds of editing with Liz and Francesca. So they would ask things like, for example, on this page, it originally started off with 12 panels, and Francesca and Liz suggested, what if you could see the head floating over the body? And what if the panels were longer? So we went from these pencils to this inked version. And that got me to this 6-panel version with these extended middle panels that got inked and colored, to the final art. And so because there were so many rounds of edits, yeah, it really like got fine-tuned every way along. And these are just things that I couldn't see it at this point in the book. I was just too close to it. So having their perspectives radically changed things. Allison's asking, how did the ending change from your first manuscript? I might have misinterpreted, but I think you said that final ending felt better in your body. Yeah, I can talk about that after, Allison, definitely. So I think the other important thing to know is that there's so many pages that I made and didn't use in service of getting to the final thing. Essentially like a graveyard of discarded pages. I have not been able to bring myself to throw out the physical pages. I've just been going through all the things in my house right now, and I can't bring myself to get rid of them yet. But here is a more finished page that was cut. This book was a labor of love. I made it for little me. What do I need in this moment? And I made it for future me, a me I don't know yet, a me I can't yet imagine. The me who wrote this book is already a past me, existing only in my heart now. And here's 2 other pages. And I mean, I gotta say, some of the pages I was really bummed to not include. I made this whole epilogue, like 15 or 16 pages, and I actually did a lot of work on it with Francesca. And then Liz was like, no, I just really feel strongly about the end of the story. And then, then as I did my own reflection, I was like, all right, I actually think that she's right about this. But um, yeah, I spent a lot of time working on some of these pages. And I like, hey, I'm using them right now. So they're getting some use. Um, I spent years searching for what I needed. If I just do more, Tumble. Buy us. We're cute, soft, and soothing. And bonus, we activate your parental longings. Ugh, I spent $1 zillion in here.
Hmm.
Or I'm triggered. I wrote this book to practice being with my grief and with the wanting that likely won't be satisfied in the way that I long for. So then after the revisions were mostly done on the book, we got to what I think was a really delightful part, partly because I didn't have to do a lot of work on it. But that was making the book cover. This part was really fun though. It was like Yeah, it ended up being like figuring out what the title was going to be. Reboot got changed to Everything is Fine, I'll Just Work Harder. And then figuring out what the cover art was going to be. This part, we had like a bunch of fun discussions, and it also evolved so much. So I made a bunch of different possible cover art possibilities.
Mm.
And then we also looked at, different ways that the art could be displayed on the cover, as well as different colors. It was like, I don't know, there's something about like any possibility, everything was on the table, right, at this point. It's wild to think like that this could have been, one of these could be out in the bookstore right now. And in fact, I kind of like that cream version a lot now that I'm seeing it again. Some of the versions immediately struck me. Like I really didn't like the yellow ones, and I did not like the red one. Um, then we also play with fonts, and then finally got to the final cover. So I did not do the font. I'm forgetting the name of my cover artist. I should know that. I don't. But yeah, I was really grateful to not do the design other than the art. And then blurbs happened. And that was a really, like, really fun and like really rewarding part of this process. So all these people whose work I admired and thought was amazing blurb my book. And so here it is. So I also want to talk about what it's like to have my book out in the world, especially as it's like a pretty vulnerable piece of work. So here it is. Here's a little celebration with friends. I've been seeing it at all different places. I'm continually kind of delighted and making this ridiculous face when I see it. Um, and yeah, I keep getting reports from friends seeing it out there. It's surprisingly like I think whatever it really needed to satisfy in me, and it's already satisfied that. And then this is kind of like the icing on the cake. I got to do some signing of it the other day. Last night was my Zoom book launch. I've got some in-person events coming up, and I got some press in Publishers Weekly and other places. Got an event coming up in Brooklyn next week. I would love if you are in New York and if you have friends, please come out. We'll have a brief reading and then we'll do some drawing together. I've got a DC event at Little District Books June 5th, and there's also a couple Philly events later in June, but those dates are still being worked out. And then I'll be at SPX in August and in Virginia in October. And I think that's the other wild thing is that this book is out in the world and it is a story about past me. So already it feels, for me, it feels like, oh, okay, that already happened. And kind of now I'm on to these new things. And so I'm going to just show you a couple of slides of some new things that I'm doing. Um, I've been working on some memoir about memoir, as my critique group likes to call it, and also braided comic essays about puffins and emotions. And I really want to end with offering gratitude for all the people who've showed up for me, folks that saw, my family and friends, my critique group, Erin, Kate, and Carol. I could not have done this without their like incredible feedback. Um, and I'm grateful for this day, for my story, for growth, and hopefully another tomorrow. Thank you for listening. And here's my Instagram and my Substack. Thanks for welcoming me.
Awesome. Yay. Cara. And always that feeling about like, oh, this is past me. Now I have new things on my mind, right? Or new cartoons I'm drawing or new new things I'm really excited about that I want to share with the world too. You know, that
Yeah.
kind of happens.
Yeah.
That's great. So I would love to see um, some questions if people have some, and maybe Allison wants to come on and ask the question that they have, or we could just address it. Go digging in the chat for it
Oh
again.
yeah, hi.
Oh, there's Allison.
Um,
Great.
I'm just at work, but yeah, was just curious about how the ending changed because you said it changed. That's like one of the things in working with memoir. I'm like, I don't know how to wrap it all up.
Yeah, so originally, so the structure of the book changed, and that also influenced the end of the book. But the end of the book originally was my therapist handing me or holding up a folder of like notes essentially and saying something about like all the work I had done. And it was really ending on this note, kind of like between us. And then ultimately, the book does not end that way. And I'm not going to say how it ends, so it's not a spoiler alert, but it does not end that way. And I'm really happy with the current ending. I mean, yeah, I think it's like it kind of shows more like the character's kind of continued journey more. But I think that really came out of like changing the structure of the book too a lot.
And and you felt more. Oh, sorry, Linda's got a question which we can go to in the chat. But you said you felt more comfortable and confident pitching it after that. And was it merely because the book had changed, but or was it more like it just something changed? It sounds like that thing inside you changed, and you're like, oh,
There's something changed. Like I felt like viscerally different about it. I felt like I kind of was like, you know what, if it doesn't work out this time, like that's okay. Like I had the Washington Post comic. The most important part of it for me felt like it was out there. And just something in my body. And I mean, I think thanks to somatic therapy, I'm like aware of these things in my body now, but yeah, something felt really different. I felt really good with it. Um, and just kind of satisfied in a deeper way. I think before it was kind of like, okay, I think it's good enough. But this time I felt like, yeah, like this is the story that I want.
okay. Do you want to answer Linda's question? And
Sure.
do you want to ask that on mic, or do you want to just?
Sure, yeah, I can ask it. Linda's asking, you've said a few times it's important to trust the process. What do you mean in this context by the process? Oh gosh, so much. But I think that, um, so, like, it's not like all fun to make this, right? Like, there's a lot of procrastination. There's also like a lot of logistics of like actually being able to do this and like have the time to make it. Um, and And sometimes, like, you're like, am I even going in the right direction? Does this make sense? Is this interesting? Why am I doing this? There were numerous times during this process where I was like, this is literally the worst idea that I've ever had. I made an Instagram post. I think actually that might have made Liz a little bit upset. It was like, don't write a book. It's like a terrible idea. Um, because it's a hard process, right? It's like even when you have this community, you have folks around you, you're still the person doing it. And I think that like understanding that it's not that it's okay if it's hard sometimes, and it's okay if like however it goes, whether the time it takes, that some parts are harder, some parts are easier. Um, it feels a lot like life. I think like we want to know all these like certainties and have more control, but we really don't have um,
That
all
that
that.
leads me to the one of the main things. I took like 8 pages of notes, Karen. Usually I take about four. So it was just such a great presentation, and thank you. But one thing that I circled and put a bunch of stars over was that you wrote that comics helped you process how little control you have over things. And you just mentioned that again about control, and that's such an interesting topic that I never really thought about. And before you came on, just before we were talking about how little control we have over making our artwork perfect, you know? And is that part of it, do you think? There's so much there, but I just wonder if that's a little
Yeah,
bit.
Yes, well, right, like even in the final book. So I was looking through the book and I found like errors, right? Like I'm like, whoops, I forgot to color in that shirt on that page. But it's kind of like I think it's like there's something I've gotten to this point where I have a lot more compassion for that stuff, and I feel more like, oh, look at this little like Easter egg that I found of like my humanness. And like or I like try to stay over there rather than being like, how could I possibly miss that, right? Like um but I think, yeah. I mean, I think the giving up control, and of course, like you can't fully give that up, and then choiceful control is important too. But being more conscious of it, I think, and also being accepting that your art changes. I mean, I think like when I look at this morning when I was looking at all that art, the art from when I was like 3 or 4 years old, the art from graduate school. My book, I think, looks really different than stuff I'm making right now. Um, it just does change. I think and I think that's something that we actually don't have very much control over.
That's so interesting. I'll let you handle. It sounded like you had another question you wanted to answer, and there are a couple more in the chat, and I'll let you decide how many you want to take and things like that. You just blew my mind though with that phrase, a little Easter egg of my humanness. Like that's definitely the best phrase and I've heard in 2025. I'm gonna use that. That is so great. Thank you.
Good, I'm glad. Liz is asking, did agents tell you as they told you that you need at least 10,000 followers in social media for them to consider trying to sell your book? Whoa. So I talked to an agent oh gosh, last spring, I believe. And the process was intense. Like she wanted to have a second book manuscript before this first one was published. And I was like, there's no way. Like I can't. I work hard, but I don't work that hard. That's not possible. I don't remember hearing them say things so much about social media followers. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're a bigger name, you have more possibilities of selling your book, um, or somehow a story that like really is super stands out. But I think that's the thing too, is that there's like all different kinds of publishers out there.
Great. Um, and I'm glad you were able to say no to that. You know, sometimes people are like, "Oh no, an agent wants me, but I need to have a second book. Okay, I'll get to work on the second book." And thank goodness you didn't do that.
Oh, there was just no, I mean, and it's funny because some of the publishing process, at least for me, so I signed this contract in November of 2023, and then I really didn't hear anything from Street Noise until January, which makes sense. It's like kind
Oh,
of
holiday.
quiet part of the year. It happens as an academic, that's a time when I have a lot of downtime. So I was kind of like, oh, I could actually have some fun drawing. But it ended up where I was working on like these braided comic essays instead then because I had time. So there's a lot of like hurry up and wait, where like I'd get things done and then I'd have this big pause. And so I'd work on other things. And I think that was actually kind of important to have other small projects to do to kind of like not have something different because there were points where I felt like, oh, I just like it was like a little bit like taskmasterish. Like I knew I had to make a page in the morning every day. Or I'd get a buildup of pages and then it was kind of impossible. So I had to try to figure out like how do I have joy in that? And if I can't have joy in it, how do I like get it done? And so sometimes like having these other things that I was working on really helped too. Um,
Yeah, we have a question in the chat that's a good one and a good
yeah.
segue.
You mentioned you made pages in service to the book, which didn't make it to the book, which is something I've realized. I have to make art in order to get to the art I actually want to make. But have you considered fleshing out the unused pages into a little zine or something? Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, so I've been using them in like talks like this to like satisfy myself a little bit. I used actually, so this is something I didn't talk about, but um, one of the parts of this that I didn't really anticipate was the publicity part. So like the book launch stuff, I've ended up using a lot of like work in progress pieces, stuff that got tossed, got used in that. I made some Instagram posts from it. I don't know if I would make them into zines. Maybe. Um, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think more, I've just kind of accepted that stuff had to be made in order to get to the final version. And then the parts that I like, I'm gonna find places for them or subject everybody to them whether or not.
I feel like that epilogue, what you shared, would make a nice little zine, and especially to take to a festival or something if somebody has your book.
It could. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. Linda saying share with your 10,000 Patreon supporters, right? Yeah.
All right. Cara, thanks. This has been fantastic. And I'm going to try and share my 8 pages of notes with people as a sort of recap, but man, that's a lot of notes. But there was just so much there. And, you know, I think it's because there was so much self-discovery in your process. I think that's why there were so many notes to take, because you kept offering a revelation that happened in the process. And that's so great. Um, because we're desperate for those revelations to happen to us too. You know, we've got so many people working through these, uh, big projects or even little projects, and we're like, when do I get to the next phase? But that next phase often is like just some understanding of
Yeah.
where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think really like giving yourself this, like this is a gift to you. Like, I mean, I think that's where like I mean, it's delightful that it's out in the world, and also it feels like it hit something that I needed just for me. And like everything else is icing on the cake, kind of. So, I mean, I think that's like the amazing thing of making art.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's that's kind of why like AI will never like AI won't like give us that satisfaction in the same way, right? So,
Not anytime soon anyway.
yeah,
I always
exactly.
worry that they're always going to be trying to replicate human experiences and they'll be like, yeah, anyway, let's not get into that. Um, well, Cara, let's let you go. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on your book, which just came out a day or two ago, right?
Yes, yeah. It just
Hooray. I
came
just
out
put it
last
in the
month, and yeah.
chat one more time. I want people to go buy it, please. And let's let everyone give Cara a round of applause. Thank you so much, Cara, for being here.
Thank
Yay,
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you,
Congratulations.
Thank you, Kara.
Yay!
Welcome.
Thank you, Cara.
Everybody.
Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find us on social media at Comics Workshop and online at sawcomics.org. You can hear about our many courses at learn.sawcomics.org. SAW is a nonprofit and supported by people like you. Learn how to make a tax-deductible donation at the donate page of sawcomics.org. You can join our free community of comics explorers at members.sawcomics.org. Thanks so much for being here.